Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown. I'm with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. James, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Doing all right this Monday. Doing okay.
Oh yeah, how was your weekend?
It was good. It was nice. My son's team got going again that I was coaching over the weekend. So that was fun on Saturday. A much better performance than I saw on Sunday from from the from the Manchester United team. Getting paid substantially more than our volunteer
I'm gonna
wages there.
be honest, mate. I've been coaching youth football for a long time, and the last 2 years or so have been. It's like the whole world is going like pathologically insane. Where so I'll just give you a quick example of what we're dealing with here. This is under eights girls football, soccer, right? Kids. There's two parents on the team who are going through a divorce, right? I mean, this is hard to believe that a grown man would do something like this. He's actually cheering the other team against his daughter because he doesn't like the coach. So they're coming out in the field losing. Like, yeah, well done. Forgive my language. Are you fucking imbecile? This is your 8-year-old daughter,
Mm,
right? And then I've got another guy on the sideline who is sitting there. I'm not joking, like Uncle Fester, right? Furious because his 8-year-old daughter is the striker that just taps the ball in the goal, right? So the kid stands on the field and doesn't move because the father has given her completely different instructions
oh
than
yeah.
what, and she just starts crying. I'm like, now this is like the fourth incident this season. I'm like, what is wrong with these people? Like, this is
Crazy.
8-year-old kids soccer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Crazy.
what the fuck are we dealing with here? Like, sorry, forgive my language, but I'm sitting here and going, I don't even enjoy this anymore,
Hmm.
right? And the one of the worst kids in the world to coach is a kid whose father typically has either coached for a year or two,
Mhm. Yep.
watched the EPL for a year or two,
Yep.
or and their confidence and their ignorance and their stupidity and their
Yep.
certainty makes it it's just a horrible experience for the child
It
because the
does. It
kid,
does indeed.
yeah, it's just like,
It's that good Dunning-Kruger
yeah,
effect. People have like a little bit of experience and they think they're an expert at that point in time
I,
and
I see it
put
all the
that
time.
off on other people. It's
I'll
terrible.
give you $5 if you score. Don't be doing that. The kid plays no football team. Okay, there's
Yeah.
your other kids, and it means you're setting them up for failure.
Yep.
Berating them after a match. I mean, the only thing you're doing is making development impossible. Anyway,
For sure.
another conversation. So, youth football, even that is now getting contaminated by the bullshit from the pros,
Mhm.
leaving kids
Yep.
on the bench for 5 minutes. You leave my kid in the bench for 5 minutes. I'm going up to the coach and going, I'll give you his rate. Because if you want to copy what's going on in the pros are getting about 400 grand a week for sitting there. Okay. If I'm
Yep.
if I'm paying you, if I'm paying a piano teacher to take my kid for piano lessons and to tell my kid you're only getting 5 minutes on the piano because they're not as good as the other kids, I want my money back.
Yeah.
Let's go, because that's not your job. Anyway, man, Manchester United doesn't make it any easier.
No, they don't. No, they do not.
4-1. I remember when we did this podcast last week, saying hopefully, by the time we do this podcast next week, we're not looking at what we were looking at. Um, but I'll be honest, James, the 2 each at Lyon probably bothered me more than the 4-1 at Newcastle.
I would feel the same way because
But for
and I
different reasons.
think yeah,
I thought the
yeah.
team played really well against Lyon,
Yes,
but I was
yes, exactly.
furious over the fact that Onana did the whole issue with Matic. Now, Onana's not responsible for what Matic said in response, but still.
Mhm.
But the folk, Matic got 2 goals in the press conference.
Yep.
He put enormous pressure on Onana just like
Yep.
Pilsen manager said, and he drops two clangers, and I'm going.
Yep.
I don't care how good your team is. No one can outplay a back goalkeeper.
Yeah. Correct. Correct. I mean, it's, and I have to say, I think they're connected. I mean, look, this is there was what happened Thursday and what happened Sunday. I think are very, very connected in that respect. This is not a team that has a lot of a team, a manager that has a lot of time together. This is not a team that has a lot of mental toughness, should we say. Like, they don't have a stable background of winning to lean back on, to fall to. They don't have a great foundation to build on. Now, United have been really good in the Europa League, and each time they've gone in there, you've expected and seen they've performed better than expectations. They've played good games. They've played good matches against Lyon. They were far and away the better team and should have scored more. And even that, with a couple really poor performances. And I think that even after the first mistake, climbing back, getting up 2-1 in that game, and, going home with that, you would have a team that is in a totally different mental state, a totally different thought process, a totally different headspace. Because I think you could see it. I don't know why, or don't know how I feel this way. Maybe there was little comments in the press or little things like that that made me feel like, because of how it ended, to walking away thinking, fuck, we didn't get out of this what we expected, where we were going to
Mhm.
win this game and head back to Old Trafford with a lead, a very easy situation to be in a team where we've played better than them, where we know we can defend a lead. I mean, look, United have played City, Arsenal, good teams in the last few weeks before this, and performed very well and come away with a point, and probably should have won both games. They've been able to defend, when they wanted to. You know what I mean by that? Like, they've been able to defend when they want to be a defensive team, and been very stable in that respect. But you go into it with a different mentality, a different mindset, and you can tell that instead of leaving Lyon thinking positive, win, got the win, heading back, all of that, you can see, like, because I know it's the same for me as a fan watching that. After that on Thursday, I practically couldn't think about Sunday. I
Mm.
mean, it was a weird one because I came into the game and did a video beforehand, and I was thinking, like, I don't feel anything about this game right now because all I can think about is Thursday. And I'm thinking this is probably an attitude that spreads through a lot of players and people, and not excusing it, but thinking
Yeah.
about that because of the result, because of the lack of confidence. It's so destabilizing, to play a game and think it can all just be thrown away for nothing. You
Well,
can be doing great and then it's just gone. How can you do anything when you think that way out the back, when it's like you could control the game, the whole game, in one shot just gonna fall into the net from nothing? How can
well,
you?
I mean, when you have
It's
to pick a defense where you have to mark your own goalkeeper,
yeah,
because he's more of a
changes
danger
how
in
you
your own
think,
back.
how you pass, how you play,
I,
everything. But it's also like it's so much.
I don't care if you have the best 10 outfield players in the world.
Hmm.
Okay. If you have a goalkeeper that does that, the nervousness spreads right throughout the
Yes.
whole team.
Yeah.
It affects confidence, it affects belief. You're saying that we need a 2 or 3 goal lead here in the last minute or two to be sure that we're going to win this game, because Onana, I don't want to pick on him, James, because at the end of the day, it's not just him, and there is a threshold between criticism and going too far and putting the boot in. I don't take any pleasure in singling him out, because he will be feeling worse than anyone himself, and Ruben Amorim sees what we see, and I don't know, what we say isn't really going to change the outcome. He had to be left out at the
Hmm.
weekend. That performance on Thursday has to have a consequence at
Yeah.
Manchester United.
Yeah.
I don't care if Bayern goes out and drops 6 in the net. Amorim still has to make that decision,
Yeah.
okay? Because if that performance does not warrant a consequence at Manchester United, then in some sense that's even worse.
Correct. Yeah.
So I don't care if it's Tom Heaton, a youth team goalkeeper, Ellie Harrison,
Should he have
whoever, it doesn't
actually
matter.
used Jorge Vital this time?
It doesn't. The thing is, James, that with Onana, we're at a point where I'm certain that Mourinho's made his mind up on him.
Yeah, 100%.
And when he came, I felt that is a fundamental piece for Ten Hag to be able to change the way they play.
Yeah.
And you do need a goalkeeper that has this better distribution with his feet. The problem is in, I suppose, United's defense. How do you find a good goalkeeper right now?
Mhm.
The
I
quality of
know.
goalkeepers in world football is appalling
Mhm.
globally because they're hybrids. The over fetishization of playing out from the back. It has its place, okay, but a lot of times it's way too risky. The ball that Bayern Deer played yesterday, this is a ball that when you're coaching youth kids, okay, you teach them the most dangerous passes in football and the most
Yep.
consequential. When you're a young kid, you don't make these passes because most kids don't have the technique yet to pull them off. Okay, so you're teaching them how to find passing angles away from danger. You do not chip a ball straight down the middle. You certainly don't float it,
Mhm.
loop it. Like you heard Roy Keane saying afterwards, if you're going to put it down the middle, you have to put it long,
Yeah, all the way to the striker, yeah.
right? Because if you make a mistake, I mean, but this is what's concerning, James. These are basics.
Mhm.
The other thing that happened on Thursday was I think that was probably Rasmus Højlund's worst game I've ever seen him play for United.
Yeah,
Really,
one of the
really,
worst
really,
games
really,
I've ever seen from
yeah,
United, to be quite
he was
honest. It was
really,
really
really poor.
bad.
Well, and I want to say that, James, because I don't want to be unfair to Onana and just single him out because it wasn't
Yes,
just him.
correct. Correct.
And there was other performances in that game that I thought were poor. I'm really worried about Hoyland, James, because I felt that his goal drought could be explained away because of, I mean, there's no doubt he plays in the United team that makes it hard. But now you're starting to see basic fundamental mistakes in his game that shouldn't be happening. You know, you
Mhm.
can make you can miss chances by doing all the right things, but if you're not in the position to get chances, that's a concern. And honestly, you're way too kind in your appraisal by saying yesterday they had their eye on Thursday. I mean, I think Ruben Amorim did with the lineup, but there were
Yeah.
other things in that game, and I'll let you jump in here that I'm concerned about, but showed up.
For sure, yeah, and yes, it's because it's not an excuse from it at all as well. I do think again that the confidence following how the Lyon game ended was certainly on the floor as well, and as we've seen, it is a
Yeah,
very mentally fragile team. They break pretty easily when things go wrong. And then Ruben Amorim had to kind of make a choice there, and I don't necessarily disagree with his choice on this either, because
yeah,
you look at it and it's
I
like,
will agree with that.
we played, and unfortunately, we played Xerxes and he ended up getting injured and pulling hamstring, which is a huge loss, I think, for United, given what was we were just discussing about Rasmus Højlund. Um, Immediately as well on Sunday's game, United were much worse when Xerxes came off. They
Mhm.
were losing at that point,
Yeah,
but they were actually really in the game. The moment he came off, it was over. They
yep,
cannot make the ball stick without Joshua Xerxes.
huge
They can't.
difference.
They cannot retain possession without Xerxes. They cannot drive the ball up the field without Xerxes. That's a problem. And I'm
Huge.
not saying it's a mixture of things, because United need that, a player like that to have. Can somebody else deputize in a role, because it's not really been Rasmus Højlund. It's not his game, even when he's doing better, to make the ball stick in the middle, to bring it up, to do all of those things. That's the biggest loss from Sunday. Um,
Huge, huge.
yeah, and it really sucks, because I think it was the right call in general to rotate as much as we could
Yeah,
and try to get some, you
of
know,
course.
players going and keep some guys fresh for Thursday. I also think that Xerxes was probably minutes from coming off the pitch, before picking up that injury as well. He hadn't started on Thursday. He was probably going to get
This
60
is the
minutes.
curse of United teams.
It is, it is. And so Aiden Heaven's back in the squad.
Yeah,
Joshua Xerxes out. Mason
I know.
Mount's back. It's like every single time it's like this. Mason
Look at
Mount
how
and Luke
few
Shaw are.
Liverpool players injured have
I
been
know,
injured this season. It's
I
so
know.
unfair.
I know. Now Mason Mount and Luke Shaw are back in the team. And both made it on the pitch. Luke Shaw made it on the pitch, right? If
Yeah,
I'm not mistaken, he
come on.
did. Yes. And Mount's had a couple appearances, been injury free in those couple appearances, which is something to be said. They're both, of course, really high quality players, Mason Mount and Luke Shaw, regardless of the injuries. So United will probably feel better that going into Thursday, they've got a lot of players available in the back five, in the midfield. Kobe Mainu is back. He's
Yeah.
again looked sharp when he's come on. So they've got Casemiro and Ugarte and Bruno and Mainu and Mount and Shaw and Heaven and all of these players. But the biggest problem is that it's been so bad up front, and we keep losing even more there. We've lost Ahmad.
Yeah, the goal.
We've
Yeah,
lost Xerxes now, who was scored on Thursday, the 2-1 goal, and has
unbelievable.
scored against Sociedad as well, and has been really probably our best forward since Ahmad has gone down by some margin. Um, and it's rough. I don't have an answer. United are gonna somehow have to get through Thursday. I don't know how, and hope, and hope
I mean,
that
yeah.
someone returns for the next game. Because Jesus.
Well, in many ways, the Xerxes injury, sort of vindicated Amorim's decision to leave players out. I mean, that's the other
Yeah.
thing you have to remember. United did just play away on Thursday night in
Yes.
Lyon, right? Tough
Yep.
game. It is a relatively threadbare squad in
Yeah.
comparison to what other Premier League teams have available. Um, Xerxes was one of the positives. Scored really nice goal away in Lyon. Had a brilliant link up that had almost Cole and York, Barcelona in
Mm.
'99. And it was a fantastic save, of course, from Pope.
Yep.
And ironically, Xerxes, when he gets injured, I think he just skipped about six players, taking it from
Yep.
his own half. The other thing is that these players are so unique. You don't have a like for like alternative. There is no like for Xerxes. There is no like for like for Ahmad. These are key players that United can't replace. There's no like for Lissandro Martinez or players like that. The United going forward just looks so flat. They look like
Yeah.
there's no threat whatsoever. It was good to see Garnacho get a goal, but I just don't feel him and Hoyland work well together.
No. Yeah, there's just not a lot of cohesion, and there hasn't been, and it is definitely an indictment. And the other, I think, certainly, indictment of things that, of course, in a lot of instances, probably coming to its end with a few players, is that when United do rotate, the drop off in their stability, the drop off in their defending, the drop off in their, in so many areas is massive. I thought that, just from rotational players that, going to Lindelof at the back was again necessary because Maguire's also just recently back from injury and Delict is out still at the moment, so you have to. But in a back three of Lindelof, Mazraoui, and Lenny Yoro was the one who looked like a leader, was the one who looked like the guy,
Don't mess with Lanny, by the way.
Yeah.
Big Lanny.
Yeah.
I love that, by the way, when he
I
was
really,
defending
really
Michael Matt.
do.
I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
son. By the way, anytime there's a wee Danny Brook, he's one of the first ones over.
Yeah, you were just talking about this, I think, last week. You were
Yeah.
speaking about that as well. And he had a really great game on Thursday as well. Obviously scored a goal too. His first
Yep.
for United and was excellent. And that's a huge positive to take away, that a player like Lenny, who's young, is actually developing correctly at United, is actually growing, is actually improving, is not floundering. And I think that's a positive sign on kind of the overall
Yeah.
view of things here. Because it's probably the first time a young player like him has come in on pretty big money and actually living up to it and stepping up and improving and going the right direction in a long while. Um, but yeah,
And how
it
many
was a
goals United can see could you say are a result of Lanny Euro? I mean, I I,
yeah.
I
He had
can't
like
think of
one
any.
game against
One,
Forest earlier in the season, maybe, and he
yeah.
missed it on a header, and that was about it, honestly, to me. So
Yeah, no, very, very encouraging. But what I would, what where I was disappointed against Newcastle, where I saw some things that to me had nothing to do with who United played on Thursday, or where their mindset was. They conceded a goal.
Yeah.
Look at the first goal they conceded, James. Right, watch the back, and Xerxes has the ball out wide, and he
Mm-hmm.
looks to his right to release the ball up to Garnacho, so United can play out. But Garnacho's sitting in midfield, didn't run for the out ball, and doesn't
Yeah.
really want the ball. So Xerxes forced to go backwards
Yeah.
and then go across the field, get caught out, and concede. The second goal, you can't play three centre backs if someone's going to walk right through your centre backs and tap the ball
I
in.
just don't understand that.
That
It's just
reminded me of the Brighton goal. You remember the one
yeah.
that came back across the box where Maguire got blamed for it for standing there, but Martinez's ball wasn't the back post?
Yeah.
Excuse me. The next one, the Harvey Barnes one, where I think Mazraoui
Just the
slips,
slip from Israel, yeah.
walks right through the center of defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of
Yep.
course, the buy-in deer. These are all fixable. I think there
Yep.
was one point, James, where, excuse me, Newcastle had a free kick. Tonali's running with the ball. United have about 7 players on the line, and none of them press the
I
ball.
know, I know. God, and he just lines up a shot
Like,
and they're just standing there. And I'm
Bruno
like,
Guimaraes gets the ball. Ericsson peels off. He swings the ball in, and Isak gets a head on it. Where's the pressure on the ball?
mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
not because of who you're playing on Thursday.
Correct.
These, and I understand as you start losing, that intensity goes with it.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that I'm looking at and going, that's not forgivable.
Yeah. I mean, I would tend
And
to
I've
agree.
seen it
And
before. I've seen you do it before.
correct, correct. And look, I don't want to single one player out in this, but I would say that in at least two of those goals in particular, there's a big difference, and this is why I've said a lot of times in recent times that Maguire doesn't get enough credit for the type of player he is. And I would say the same goes for why I've actually been really happy with Matthias de Ligt, who in another respect too. When someone comes down the
Yeah.
middle, there's two decisions a center back has. In a back three, that central center back, they can keep backpedaling all the way to their goal, or they can go and make a tackle or a foul. I don't care which at that point in time. Maguire and De Ligt, 9 times out of 10, will step up and make that tackle. They will be that aggressive player. They will make that play, or they will foul them. Maybe they miss the tackle, and then it's a different thing. At least they made the right decision. One of the I think the big criticisms with Lindelof has been throughout his career at United. He's always running backwards as a defender,
Yeah.
and
Someone's got to
we've
play that ball.
I know because
Someone's got to
somebody
go.
should be coming out and stepping forward. When one guy is running at three defenders, one person has to step up and block them, and just you put them off. Even if you don't make the tackle, you're slowing them down, you're stopping them, you're getting everybody behind the ball. You cannot just let them run through you.
You remember
And
when Spurs did this when Van der Ven did it? And there
yes,
was supposed to be recriminations after that where no
yeah,
one will ever walk through United's entire
yes,
cent, and someone's going to take responsibility. And I think that was the game that Gatti dropped, if I remember.
yes,
The
yes.
So sorry, carry on, mate. Yes, that's
No,
where I'm
no,
seeing
I
these
agree with
repeated
you.
patterns.
Yeah, yeah, and look, it does happen, and it has happened, and it's like, how, why? And it's but especially now that I look at it as a back three, that we've been playing now. I just want to bear in mind, Lindelof also played in one of those quarterfinal games, but against Tottenham, that this has happened before. But it's obviously it's a team wide responsibility that someone has to step up, and make some tackles and actually take somebody out. I would also suggest that, one thing that I think cannot happen at this point that we've seen, one thing I think maybe Ruben Amorim got wrong pretty badly on Sunday is he's tried it a few times. Christian Eriksen cannot play in a midfield
Mm,
two. He cannot. You just
no.
can't. If you swapped him and Bruno, I think the game would have gone a lot better in that case. I like Bruno being more forward too, but you can't play Christian Eriksen in a midfield two. Every game that he's played recently in a midfield two with a partner this whole season has been disastrous.
No.
Because he just doesn't have the legs there, and it means the other person is doing way more cleanup work, but it also means he's just going to be targeted the whole game by the opposition to run
Yeah,
at.
I
It's
don't.
that was a bit of a mistake, I think, for me. You just it's one you can't afford that, because regardless of rotation, if you wanted to play him, put him in the front three as a 10 and swap somebody else into
Well,
the midfield for me.
for Ericsson, he has to be played in a team that you dominate possession in, where you're
Yes.
not expecting him to have to cover defensively, and
Yeah.
where you can carry him in a way, but you need to just don't have that coverage in the middle.
Yeah.
They're just too wide open.
Yeah.
I don't think Amorim has too many other choices, obviously, with considering what's available to him.
Yeah. But I also
But
get you didn't want to play Casemiro again because he's going to want him for
of course,
Thursday, and he doesn't
absolutely.
want to play Mainu because he just came back from injury. He doesn't want to start him. It's just, Newcastle also have one of the most physical, aggressive, and fastest midfields in the entire Premier League in Tonali and Jolinton and these guys. Like they are and Bruno Guimaraes. These are fast, very, very aggressive players, and it's probably the worst possible matchup for someone like Ericsson to play in the midfield. But yeah, the options are obviously limited because it's like you pick one 31-year-old, or you pick another 33-year-old.
I
It's
know.
like,
I mean, this is something that obviously Nid will have to address in the summer. How they address it, I do not know, because Champions League is obviously going to be very, very important.
yeah.
I'm not sure what to expect against Lyon on Thursday. I would imagine United will be much improved. I wonder who he will pick in goal. I think he'll probably go with Onana again,
Mm,
but James, whoever he goes with, the pressure on that goalkeeper and focus. Because here's the one thing that's slightly unfair in Bandier. Onana gets left out because of what's going on, obviously, enormous focus. But now there's enormous focus on Bandier that
mm,
if it just happened organically, where, okay, you rest Onana, you put Bandier in, you can come in without that pressure. Now he's under pressure to be perfect,
yes.
where he knows if I make one mistake, I'm back out. And as a
Mm-hmm.
goalkeeper, but see, to me, James, with that in mind, that's where I felt Bandier should have been safe. Don't take unnecessary
Yeah.
risks, right? Because I'm one major mistake away from this happening. But you
And
basically got
and
two bad
it,
choices in goalkeeping, and
yeah,
that's neither are particularly encouraging.
for sure. And just to defend him a bit on that last thing, because I would say up until that last pass, I thought he actually had a pretty good game in general. I thought he was
I thought his
better. I mean,
kicking was terrible, James.
well,
Really,
I,
really
I I
poor.
hear you on that, but is there anybody who's kicking has
But
been
see,
any
this is
good?
what I'm like. If you're a
Yeah.
professional footballer and you
Yeah,
got to
and
rate
that's
off
fair.
being a decent
Mm,
kicker, like to me, the whole if you're going to be an average shot stopper, poor on crosses, then you better be decent with your feet.
yeah.
Otherwise, if you're poor
But
with
was
your
he
feet,
not better with the crosses, with the claims, with the punches? Like he was when he was hitting them, they were being knocked away from goal. He made a few catches that I think usually are getting palmed
yeah,
down into our territory. Like, isn't it better? I guess I'm looking at look, no matter what, it's flawed. But was it better than what we see from Onana? Just to spill,
I mean,
constantly spilling the ball straight in front of goal.
yeah, I mean, we're really, comparing,
Should we go
shit
Tom
plus lip
Heaton?
sauce and without really. Like to
Yeah.
me, you know, Bayern had a decent game away to Arsenal that got United through,
Yeah.
and I think if I remember correctly, that he was partly put in because of previous mistakes Onana had just made before
Yes.
that,
Yes.
and I'm
And he was good on
scratching my
pens too, mind you, for a cup game.
I'm scratching my head here, James, going, how is this guy who was voted the best goalkeeper in the Champions League, right? The season United signed him, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's just not the Premier League he's suited to. The big physicality, there's lots of goalkeepers have found that out. But some of his worst performances have been in Europe. I mean,
I
you
know.
look at the Champions League last season, James, if United had a better goalkeeper, they'd have went through in that group.
Oh
No
yeah.
question.
Oh yeah.
So wasn't just his fault, but okay, it was a one-off season. You can write it off. Never want to see something like that again. And then I think of so many games in Europe this season, even the Porto game away, where I felt that he could have done better on some of the crosses and stuff that came into the box where I felt he was poor. I can just think of off the top of my head so many games where I'm thinking these are basic bread and butter things. Now, I can think of
Mhm.
also so many games where Garnacho's per finishing has also cost United one-on-ones.
Yeah,
It has
of
a
course.
huge
Yeah,
consequence, so you can't just pin it all on Onana.
of course, of
That
course.
also has a fact. That also has an impact on United's confidence when you've got players constantly missing one-on-ones. But these are individual things that are not a result of Amorim's system that
Correct.
have
Yeah.
to get fixed
Yep.
individually. And but I look at that and I'm going, I you know to get through and win that final without having another major goalkeeping lapse or two is not something I'm confident.
For
But
sure. And I guess the way I would think about it is this, right? I think the choice to be made is much less who's the better keeper, and I think it's gonna have to come down
by the way, I'm
to,
just getting an alert right now. There's an earthquake.
"Oh, shit, well, if I see you start shaking,
Seriously is.
then, I'll be
Earthquake
ready."
alert. Drop, hop, protect yourself.
Just a
Okay, go ahead,
California
man.
day, isn't it? Well,
Maybe I'm
hopefully
already
nothing
dead. I don't
major
know
over
it.
there. Magnitude 3.3. It's down in San Diego, so hopefully not too
What is it?
far.
How much?
It says it's 3.3. Is
Oh,
that pretty small, right? That's nothing,
yeah.
right? And it's in San Diego, so
That's weird.
you should be okay.
Yeah.
Should
Go
be
ahead,
all
sorry,
right.
man.
No, no, all good. I was just looking it up because I was like curious. Yeah, I mean that's like an everyday thing. 3.3. That's like
Yeah, I don't even know. We would never. I've never had an alert.
they've got
Yeah,
alerts for every single
and
day
I've had
above that.
5.56s. Never got. Go ahead,
Yeah.
man. Yeah.
No, no, all good, all good. But I was thinking that I think the choice probably has to be made rather than like who's the better keeper, because I don't think you can answer that question. Is if you're a defender in that United team, who would you feel more confident behind you? By India or Onana at this point in time. My personal feeling is by India because I think from a standpoint of making saves, I feel more comfortable with him. And I think that's all you're really asking for with a keeper. Against a team like Lyon, we didn't really need to play through an intense press. We didn't really need incredible passing out the back. They're not that intense of a pressing team. They tend to want to sit in possession and play slow. I think I want a keeper who's going to claim the crosses and who's going to make safe saves. And I feel that Bayindir has been better at that. And the only other factor I would say at that is that he was very good on penalties against Arsenal, and it is a cup game, and if it ends level and goes in through, we will be on penalties once again, and we need that. So I guess I would think I feel a little more confident with Bayindir behind me in terms of making saves. Um, that's what I would say, personally, but I think that's the question is
Yeah.
maybe Ruben's gotta ask his center backs here. I'm not saying he should pass off delegation of responsibility on this, but I would be sitting there getting together with my starting center backs with Maguire, with Yoro, with Mazraoui for Thursday, because those will probably be the 3, and saying, "Who would you feel more comfortable with?" Like, if Onana's there, you're gonna be shitting yourself all game about the ball's gonna, like, just what do we do, right, in this moment? Because I think it's more important that defenders feel comfortable than anything else because we don't have an ideal choice in this matter.
Let's look at the other end, forward line. So it appears that Rasmus Højlund and Garnacho are really, it's only two fit forwards.
Yeah.
Mason Mount might be part of that discussion. So United now, I would imagine Xerxes done his hamstring. You're looking at 4-5 weeks.
Yeah,
So
probably.
yeah, 4 or 5 weeks in April. That's you're looking towards the end of the season, maybe last game or season or two if United qualify for the final. Then there's the issue of when will Ahmad be match fit. Cheetah will be, of course, can't play in the Europa League.
Mm,
This is really thin, James.
it is, yeah, and obviously, well, the extent of Xerxes' injury and when Ahmad will be back, if we make it through this round, are the best reinforcements we could hope to get, but, um, I guess my question I think what will probably happen here that may alleviate this a little bit, hopefully, or can help, is we've been having some. Again, we played Ugarte and Casemiro together in the midfield, not allowed at least Bruno to get into the front line against Lyon, and it seemed to work pretty well. And he did that against City too, and it seemed to work pretty well. Mount and Mainu are two very good players that if they can make it on the pitch, I mean, neither are your traditional forwards. That's part of the problem, right? You're not really
Mhm.
getting anybody with pace. You need to hold the ball. If you can hold the ball, if you can have a lot of possession, then I think you could do something like that with the two of them in there. But honestly, I'd probably run out Bruno Garnacho and Mount on Thursday if it was me. And I know it's not the perfect decision, but it's like, what else can you do? Garnacho still gives you some pace to run. He did score against Newcastle, so maybe he's in a little bit more form, at the moment than Rasmus was. Mount is a
I
good
mean, I
player
agree
who
with
can
you. What
help you
else can
keep
you
the
do?
ball. It's
Yeah.
like, is it ideal? No, of course not. But Mount is a good player if he can be on the pitch. He can help you keep the ball. He can move it around. Bruno, we know what he can come up with, and he's been big in Europe. And Garnacho, you're still getting that outlet ball, that runner, the player who can, he can focus on doing that, and maybe find some form. Because I thought he was. I don't think he had a good game against Lyon, but I feel as though he was involved in creating
Let me ask
something
you about
there as
Mason
well.
Mount.
Yeah.
I know he's been injured a lot. Lots of people have this very, very high opinion of Mason Mount
Mhm.
that I've never really seen.
I know what
To
you're
be honest.
saying. Yeah.
So I think in the coming up on the end of the second season, the only thing that I can think about with Mason Mount is a goal away to Brentford.
Mhm.
If Mason Mount wasn't Mason Mount, say just somewhat, would he be getting away with this? Would we be absolutely certain in his undeniable quality? Because name me his top 3 highlights at Man United in the last 2 years.
I can't tell you. I really can't.
Just
I do
3.
not know. Like what I would say is that I recall the goal against Brentford coming on and winning.
Mhm.
Yes, that's about the
Give me
one I could
another one.
remember. Then the only other one I could remember was, unfortunately, he had a really good um thing going against Tottenham in the first half in like his second game before getting injured, and that's it. Honestly, like that is it, because I remember the performance being good and then him getting
So
injured, and I cannot remember him since then for that reason. And I don't
he's
disagree with you
wasted
at all.
again. Why aren't we
Yeah.
seeing glimpses of that where I'm like, this is what we've been missing? Or
Yeah.
he's not
Well,
explosive. He's
hold
not
on.
going to
Wait,
take
wait.
last
Let me
guys.
let
He's
me
going to do this, do this. Like I'm
I'll tell you
struggling to
why. I'll
see
tell
if there
you
was
why.
another player coming on that
Yeah.
was, Mason Mount and drag. I don't know if I know the difference.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that does stand out to me, because I've been thinking, why do I have it in my head? Um, he played under when Amram first came in. One of his first matches was in the Europa League, and we'd had to come off the back of a couple of draws to 20 to Porto, to Fenerbahce, I believe, and then what was it? It was
Was
against
Pilsen away?
P- PAOK.
Yeah, it was PAOK. Yeah, Park.
Yeah, and it was that game, or was the other one that he played in? But he played in a game, um, and he played in that
Yeah,
game
someone you've
in the
never heard
10
of.
position. Yeah, and I can't remember which one it was, but he played.
I'm not knocking him. Like I want
No,
him to
but
do
it is
really
the
well. I just
Europa League. You know what I'm saying? I think it was probably Pilsen, actually,
get
if
you.
I'm not mistaken. I think it was probably
Okay.
Pilsen. Um, but it was one of these two games, and he played in the 10 position at some point during this game, and he was actually really good. He was really good in that role. The right side was really dynamic between him. I think between him and Ahmad, and even Anthony at one point. It was actually really good dynamic, and they were creating a lot of chances and all of that kind of stuff. And I thought this is actually a really good performance, and there's a lot of quality in here that we haven't seen. It was a game I think Rasmus scored a goal or two in,
I mean, he
from what I
obviously has a
recall.
lot of quality, James. The people
Yeah,
that rate him are not idiots.
yeah,
They obviously, you're talking about Tuchel that rates him really highly.
yeah,
I've heard Lampard say things about him. I've heard,
yeah. And he
obviously
won the
other
Champions League with Chelsea. I mean, he
yeah.
was a key part of that team that
I
won it.
mean, but I just have never seen
Yeah,
any of that at United where I'm like,
I agree
if
with you
Mason
there.
Mount left at the end of the season, what would I be devastated that we miss? Like,
Yeah,
what would I be sitting there going? There are certain players that if Bruno Fernandes left, I know what United would miss. Even Garnacho, there's other players where you can look at and go, there's an obvious skill set and strength here that United will lose if this player leaves. If Mason Mount left, and someone said to me at the other team, describe him for me, based on what you've seen in the last 2 years. I don't know if I'd be able to get past one or two sentences before it was pretty obvious I was out of my depth.
yeah,
I want to be. I'm sure there's a quality football in there, but we have these thresholds for everyone else, 2 seasons. If you
Yeah, I
haven't done
agree.
it, so can the it's not easy to sell a player that doesn't play
Mhm.
football.
Yes.
So and
That's the
I
problem, really,
and I would love him to stay fit, and I hope he does stay fit, where we can see the player that I would say that a lot of United fans haven't seen.
Yeah.
But hopefully he shows that, because this is the time to see it. But even if we get the best Mason Mount that we had at Chelsea, is he someone that's going to come in and get United goals?
I think he can in these types of games. I think he
Yeah.
can in these types of games. I think he can. What do I expect it? Not necessarily. We're gonna have to score goals as a unit, no doubt about that. That's the only way we've been getting through in general. But we do know Bruno is capable. I'm kind of more thinking. I really need someone in Mason Mount in that front three who's going to draw a lot of attention, who's going to help make space for others and do things like
This is
that.
part
Because
of the problem, James.
yeah,
Because United are playing so deep defensively. When you look at Xerxes yesterday, one of the reasons why he ends up doing his hamstring is because he has to beat 6 players before he gets
yes,
to the edge of the box, because he's got no
correct, yeah,
numbers. If you put 8, 9, 10 players behind the ball, the whole game is going to be played in your half.
correct,
And they're
correct.
going to commit further players forward because there's no threat.
Yep.
So when United are breaking forward, there's paltry numbers. There's one
Yes,
player on the
I
ball
know.
and
Not
maybe
enough
one
guys in the
other
box.
there. Maybe Steve, even the goal that scored, Dalot breaks. Garnacho's his only option, right? I mean, Newcastle should never have allowed that goal, because there's one or two things is going to happen. Dalot is going to try to take that on himself, or he's going to square the ball to Garnacho. It's not complicated.
Yep.
And there's just so little threat when United go forward, where there's a real lack in numbers. There's so many players behind the ball. They're picking teams that have, 8, 9. And I understand Amorim's just, right now it's about not losing games. I understand that.
Yeah.
But when I was looking at that game yesterday, I was like, it's just basic law averages. If a team's playing 70% of the game
Yep.
in your half, they're much higher probability that they're going to win it. United never looked like they had the numbers to get forward,
Yep.
or were trying to commit to get forward. And I'm sitting here going, okay, so if you're Amorim, to me, he has a lot to prove, James. A lot.
Mhm.
And when I looked at his Premier League winning record, it's like, if I pulled it up yesterday, I was looking at it, his wins he's got 6 wins in the Premier League out of
Mhm.
21 games. Those wins, home to Fulham, against Fulham, Everton, that was under Sean Dyche, Man City, Southampton, Leicester, and Ipswich.
Mhm.
So outside of Southampton, Leicester, and Ipswich, he's won 3 Premier League games. Now, I like him. I'm not judging him right now, but I'm every other United manager's had a period by this stage, and I understand Amorim's slightly different because of when he came in, with maybe the exception of Ranić. They've had a stage where they're now starting to fly.
Yeah.
By this stage of their United career, they've got momentum. They're moving forward. You still lose a game here or there, but you still can see something that's emerging. What happened against Newcastle? That used to happen once in 20 years, and it would be a team's, DVD, and it would be replayed on Sky 4 or 5 times. This happens every week.
Mhm. Yeah, I get that. I also think that in the recent games leading up to this, where it didn't stick out too much for me, I think United have been a lot better. In general at preventing this. Like when you look at just the results that came before this, I think they should have probably beat City. Not that it was a great game, but they certainly didn't let City have their way with them, like we've seen so many times in the past. They had a really great performance against Arsenal. They won a few games there in between. They got through in Europe.
They lost to Forest. They didn't score against City. They didn't beat Arsenal.
I hear
There's
you.
been some improvement, but
Yeah, I hear you
then
on
we
that.
got murdered against Newcastle. Like, and this was the game. It was a set of fixtures we were concerned about. Like, this is where we'll
Yeah.
find out,
But
and we'll
how
find
can
out.
you? Like when you look at things in general, like 0 goals against City, 0 goals against Forest, 1 goal against Arsenal, 1 goal against Fulham in the cup. You 0 against Tottenham before that, 0 against Palace before that. I get that is bad in that respect. I really do. But I also think at the same time, it's like we have probably the worst attacking unit in the Premier League, including the relegated clubs when you look at it numbers wise. Their number 9 at Southampton has more goals than Rasmus Højlund in the Premier League, with less minutes, less appearances at 30 years old, and you probably don't even know his name. I don't actually remember it either. We have probably the worst attacking unit in the Premier League, and we keep having to sacrifice as well because we don't have a midfield either. And so we're constantly sacrificing Bruno because Lissandro's been injured and all that. And when I look at the unit of it, since Ahmad has gone down and since Rashford is not here, it is the worst front three in the Premier League. And I think that that is an unbelievable state for United to be in. And it's not just that it's bad, it's also extremely young and inexperienced at the same time, and so we're looking for players. Who do we look to save us? Mason Mount, who, as you discussed, has not been here in 2 years to try to get some goals, who's barely played. We can barely remember him. Kabi Mainu, who hasn't actually played in the forward positions, bar one game, that we're hoping will come forward there. The decisions that we have to make, and then Dorgu at left wing back to hopefully be an attacker because Luke Shaw hasn't been healthy in 2 years, to help chip in or get some goals because he was finding himself in more attacking areas than most of our forwards. It is the worst, and I don't necessarily mean on skill, but in terms of how it's built, age, experience, all of that unit in the Premier League. And so it's not really a surprise to me because I look at it and think all of those things happen, but if you have better forwards, even
What did Højlund
mediocre
score last
forwards.
season under Ten Hag? What was his goal return?
Let
And
me look here.
what
I
was
think it was in the
Garnacho? What
Premier
was
League. I think
Højlund
it
and
was
Garnacho's goal return last
yeah.
season?
I think Højlund had 10 in the Premier League last season.
And
Okay, and
then
Garnacho had 7 in the Premier League last
what
season.
did they have overall Europe? Because I think Højlund ended up with like 15 or something, didn't they?
I think that Højlund ended with 15 in all competitions last year. And Garnacho was probably similar, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see.
They've had a significant drop under Amorim.
Well, but it started with the start of the year as well. I mean, Højlund has, I think, the first half of the season they weren't scoring either, really.
Garnacho, I think, had Garnacho has a problem, but if you look at Garnacho's form under Ten Hag and under Amorim, there's been a drop off. I might think I'm correct saying that, but I mean, if we look at the Garnacho we had last season and the Garnacho we have this season, and I'm not putting that on Ten Hag or Amorim, and it may well, you may be right, we'll never know. It might have transpired that it would be this way under Ten Hag too. I probably wouldn't be much different, to be fair. But what we have to be honest and say, look, the Garnacho that Ten Hag nurtured, developed is a million miles away from the one we're seeing right now. And we had glimpses of Rasmus Højlund last season in moments where he had runs of form, where he was scoring a broad variety of goals, where he looked a different player than the one that we see right now. Nonetheless, Ten Hag never got a Manchester United team scoring goals either. So,
but here's one of the things on that I just want to point out too, because I think you're correct on this. But one of the things I did note, like with Garnacho specifically, if you look at his numbers, the vast majority of his numbers come as a substitute, including under Ten Hag this season. He had 3 of his 4 goals and assists come as a substitute under Ten Hag versus just 1 as a starter. And the part of the problem is he was playing mostly behind Marcus Rashford last season and the season before for a good chunk of the year.
Not last season, he wasn't.
For a chunk of the year, for the first half, I think
season,
he was. But
Marcus Rashford was asked to play deeper, and Garnacho ended up being the advanced winger. So
but even last season, just on that basis, 7 goals, 6 assists in the Premier League. When you actually break them down, it's kind of wild to see this, but almost all of up until I think it was like the middle of the year, they mostly were coming as a substitute essentially up until that point in time, and his record there tend to be a bit better, and then he picked it up and it improved. But I think that's part of it as well, is that it's like
I think there's another
dearth of options, and the higher pressure has been getting to a lot of these guys.
I also think in Amorim's defense, Garnacho wanted to leave in January,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
think that his heart was set on a move, and he certainly didn't look the same player after the end of January. When that move
Yeah.
didn't happen, it looked like he. I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong, so I don't know, but it just there was a drop off. There's no
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
But so yes, I think obviously you need to have a dearth of options up front, but I also think some of that, James, is a result of the fact that the front two end up so deep because
Yeah.
there's going to be huge gaps between the defense and the midfield and the forwards, what we used to see with Ten Hag's teams. So they have to drop deep. And if you look at where they're primarily picking up a ball, it's everything into feet. You have to, when you're Xerxes has to be everything in the feet.
Yeah.
Hoyland you can put in the channels and you can have him run on. But if you look at where United forwards are getting the ball, it's where you don't want them. I mean, Hoyland's getting rinsed for not being holding up the ball, but he's getting the ball 10 yards inside his own half with a big centre
Mm-hmm.
back over it. And even if he gets the ball, by the time he gets support, right? The defense is already set. The move breaks down. I mean, I'm not. There's certain things I've already said about Holland that I'm concerned about, but you don't want your forwards picking up a ball where they're picking up the ball at United, and
Yeah.
I'm just really worried about where those numbers are going to come from to score goals because
Yeah.
honestly, man, I'm what one of the worst feelings is apathy. And watching what happened
Mm-hmm.
against Newcastle and the ball's flying, and it's not even hurting. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
it's total resignation. Like I said, the Lyon thing where Onana dropped it in the net twice. I'm like, I don't even want to repeat what I was saying after that,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's just really, really, really frustrating. Okay, so
Just not wrapping up on that little point there on that goal scoring. Then there was a story Friday from Laurie Whitwell in the Athletic, and that I
Mhm,
think has a lot of merit as well. That
mhm,
United are looking at two goal scorers up front, which
mhm,
was they were looking at Liam Delap and Cunha. They're not the
yeah,
only options for sure, but I do know from my own information that this is certainly well within the frame that they want two goal scorers to add to this team because
mhm,
it is that limited. I think that's the right plan. I also think I can see the logic here as well in ideally picking up a couple players who are in the Premier League right now because it's one of the big drop-offs we've seen in buying goal scorers and attackers from other leagues that it doesn't necessarily translate. I mean, we saw with Jadon Sancho going from a 40 goal and assist player in Dortmund to coming in and being completely ineffective here. Um, whereas I've seen players like Lukaku transfer in between and pick up and start scoring goals right away, which United will need. But what do you make of that plan? Like Delap and Cunha giving you a couple more options up front.
mhm.
They can play together. You could play Cunha at 9 sometimes if you wanted, I think too. I like the concept of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're two very different strikers.
Yeah.
They're players that would give United something different. I think that both of them are better than what United have right now.
Yeah.
Ideally, for me, it would be someone like Cunha and Osman. I don't think
Yeah,
that
of course.
Osman
I
thing is
agree.
going to happen with United.
Yeah.
Um, it'll be interesting to see what happens with City. City have I think a £20 million buyout clause back on him, but
Yeah.
I doubt they'll exercise it having signed Mamouche.
Yeah, I don't think he
Um,
wants to go there because they still need him to
yeah,
say yes. Yeah.
it'll if United will have competition for Delap, there'll be other teams in for him.
Chelsea especially.
Yeah, what would concern me is what comes after the Osman Delap list.
Mhm.
What comes
If you
after
can't,
that.
yeah.
And
Yep.
whether you're. Anyway, we'll not go down the list of other mediocre names that are completely
Yeah.
uninspiring to me. That just feel
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
these are names that are just going to that are just players that are very much like the players that you have. Not be that much different. So it's hard to get quality when you're struggling, James. And I think that Europa League is going to be very, very important. But even after Lyon, like Bilbao and stuff, these are
Yeah, Bilbao's probably
going to be
tough.
very, very,
Yeah.
very difficult teams for United to beat. So Amorim will have done an unbelievable job if he wins that Europa League and gets United in the Champions League next season. I'm still skeptical that it will happen. because I just don't have any confidence in being able to predict the future with United, because you can't when you have a goalkeeper, right?
I
That
know.
drops balls in the net, or you miss simple chances, or you give up goals that nobody else in the league gives up. It's just that's hard to have any confidence in the future whenever these things are inexplicable and it's hard to account for them. So
Yep.
Cunha and Delap would be much better,
Then
but
just one, yeah.
they also, like we were saying earlier, need a midfield, James,
Yes.
and
Yes. And a keeper.
a keeper
Has to
without
be
doubt.
addressed this
Yeah,
summer.
and they're not easy to find. A
Yeah.
goalkeeper, midfielders you can get, but what worries me is where United are going to go shopping for those midfielders if they don't win the Europa League, and if they're going to be significantly better than what they have right now.
Yeah, I would definitely agree there, and that we're gonna have to see on. In terms of the Europa League, I think Ahmad is targeting to return by the next round if we can make it. It's May 1st. He's back on grass. He's been ahead of schedule. I think that would be a huge boost for
Oh,
United.
massive need, badly
I
need that.
mean, he's the best forward they have at the club right now, so that would be really big. So hopefully that would give me a lot more
Yeah,
not confidence, but a lot more belief that it's possible. Let's put it that way.
they badly need that
Yeah.
individual quality when you
Yeah.
don't create like that. Anything else before we go, mate?
That's it, my friend.
Okay. All right, folks. Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast. As always, for tuning in. I hope you're all well. We will be back again next week. Take it easy, folks. All the best, James. See you later, man.
See you later, bud.